Before you turned 2 years old, there was no you. Not in the way you experience yourself right now, not as a coherent self with a past, a personality, or a sense of existing across time. You were alive, you were learning, but the person you call me hadn't been built yet. That means every memory you think you have from before age 2, they're not yours. They're reconstructions, stories told to you later by parents and photographs. And the evidence for this unsettling truth starts with a simple experiment involving a mirror and a spot of lipstick. How can a human being be conscious, responsive, and emotional, yet not have a self? To answer that way, we need to look at the moment the mirror stops being a stranger. In 1972, developmental psychologist Beulah Amsterdam at the University of North Carolina ran a now famous study. She placed a smudge of rouge on the noses of infants aged 9 to 24 months and sat them in front of a mirror. The result was stark. Children under 18 months either ignored the mark or reached out to touch the mirror, as if the reflection were another baby. Only after 18 months did they reach for their own nose. That gesture, touching the rouge on your own face, is the first visible sign of self-recognition. It marks the birth of a self-concept. This moment is now considered a developmental milestone, the first clear evidence that a child has formed a concept of themselves as a separate entity. So the first time you ever recognized yourself in a mirror, you were likely already a year and a half old. Before that, you looked at your own face and saw a stranger. But self-recognition in a mirror is just the surface. The deeper question is, when do you start to remember being you? That's where the work of psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University comes in. In a series of studies throughout the early 2000s, Bauer and her team interviewed children as young as 2 years old, asking them about unique events they'd experienced months earlier. Trips to Disney World, birthdays, accidents. They returned later to see if the children could recall those events without help. The finding was consistent. Children under 2 have almost no stable, accessible memories. The reason? The brain hasn't yet built a self to anchor those experiences to. Without a continuous sense of I, events happen, but they don't stick as personal memories. Bauer's 2007 study showed that the neural infrastructure for autobiographical memory, the ability to mentally time travel and replay your past, only begins to develop around age 2, and it takes years to mature. So every cry, every laugh, every first step you took before age 2, your brain recorded none of them as your story. Those moments happened to a body that would eventually become you, but at the time, they happened to no one. So when did the real you show up? That question has a name. It's called the Mirror Self-Recognition Test, or MSR. And it's one of the most famous experiments in developmental psychology. In 1970, psychologist Gordon Gallup placed a red dot on the forehead of an anesthetized chimpanzee, then let it wake up in front of a mirror. If the chimp touched its own forehead, not the mirror, it showed it recognized the reflection as itself. Gallup found that only chimpanzees older than about 4.55 years passed. If you're enjoying this, subscribing helps us make more videos just like it. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Okay, back to the video. For humans, the same test was adapted by researchers Michael Lewis and Jean Brooks Gunn in 1979. They put a dot of rouge on toddlers' noses and sat them in front of a mirror. At 15 months, only about 15% of children touched their own nose. By 18 months, that number jumped to 50%. At 4 months, over 80% passed. That's the milestone. Between 18 and 24 months, your brain suddenly saw you in the mirror, not as another baby, but as yourself. But what's actually happening inside the skull? The neurological shift is just as dramatic. Around age 2, a network of brain regions called the default mode network starts to wire itself together. This network, involving the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and precuneus, is what lets you think about yourself, reflect on your past, and imagine your future. In a 2015 fMRI study at Harvard, researchers led by Fiery Cushman scanned toddlers' brains while they watched videos of themselves. In children under 18 months, the default mode network was barely active. After 24 months, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Your sense of self literally emerges as a new neural circuit. Here's where it gets even stranger. You don't just lack a self until age 2. You lack the ability to form the kind of memories that require a self. There's a reason your first conscious memory is probably from around age 3 or 4. That's called childhood amnesia. And it's not just a quirk of forgetfulness. In a 2021 review, psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University showed that the earliest autobiographical memories, the ones you can actually replay like a movie, almost never happened before age 3. Why? Because the hippocampus, which encodes episodic memories, isn't fully online until the self exists to anchor them. Without an eye to experience events, they slip away forever. But that doesn't contradict the idea that babies learn and form habits. They still do. A newborn recognizes its mother's voice within days. A 6-month-old knows that a hidden toy still exists. These are implicit memories, stored in systems like the basal ganglia and cerebellum. They affect your behavior, but you don't experience them as your past. They're like a computer's operating system, invisible software that runs without a user. Now for the complication. Not every researcher agrees that the self appears this late. Psychologist Philippe Rochai at Emory University argues that infants have a primitive, ecological self from birth, a sense of being a body separate from the world. In his 2003 paper, he showed that newborns already distinguish between their own movements and external ones. By 3 months, babies prefer to look at a live video of themselves rather than a delayed one. By 12 months, they imitate others and feel emotions like embarrassment. Some researchers say the mirror test misses these subtler forms of self-awareness. The debate is real. Is the self a sudden dawn at 18 months or a gradual sunrise starting at birth? Here's the synthesis that most scientists land on. There's a difference between a minimal self, the moment-to-moment feeling of being, and a narrative self, the continuous I that remembers and plans. The minimal self might exist from the start, but the narrative self, the one you think of when you say me, only consolidates around age 2. Your baby brain like the camera with no film. It recorded everything, but there was no one to look at the pictures. That's why you can't remember being a baby. Not because the memories are locked away, but because the lock was never built. So here's where that leaves you. Think back to that 6-month-old version of yourself. You were crying, laughing, exploring, but there was no you watching the show. The person reading this sentence right now wasn't there. The moment your consciousness first clicked on, that mysterious point between 18 and 24 months, you woke up into an already running story. You didn't start your life. You joined it late, with no memory of how it began. And that's the unsettling truth. The person you are today didn't exist for the first 2 years of your life. The baby in those photos is someone else, someone who got to meet the world before you arrived.